All right, good morning and welcome to the Pharmacy Residency Podcast, member of the Pharmacy Podcast Network. Please, if you want to follow, what I'm going to do is create a course that I'm just going to kind of email out each week as you go, because residency season is really October, November, December. And what I'm going to do is once a week, I'm going to send you part of that course. So to get on the email list, you just go down to pharmacyresidencypodcast.com and then just subscribe. And what I'm going to do is I'll just number the episodes, lesson 1, lesson 2, lesson 3. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to have 12 lessons as we move up to New Year's. And we're going to do about 4 a month, something like that. And that's going to start in 2 weeks. So make sure you get on the email list at pharmacyresidencypodcast.com. Let's talk about a couple of the more recent jobs that have come up. There is a director of drug information group at, University of Illinois, Chicago. Again, this is one of those academic positions that's a little bit higher and that you would need significant background. But it's always good to kind of start looking at these and see, okay, where did that fit in? What are the things that they needed? So PharmD, that you've gotten a PGY1 and PGY2 with drug information, and then you have 1 year of experience at the director level. So this is kind of one of those transfer jobs where maybe you've had the job somewhere else, but they're expecting you to have 1 to 2 years of experience already as a faculty member. This one, I want to say that most people don't think about being dean of a college, and I'm sure if you ask the deans and you said, did you ever wake up and say, I want to be dean, when you were graduating pharmacy school? But what you find is that much like head coaches, they tend to move around, and once a dean, always a dean, and there's usually another position. So what happens is you start as faculty, you find that you enjoy administration, and you kind of become somebody who likes to work with maybe the administrative side where you're now leading the group, and there's some positions that kind of move up toward it. But Dean of Keck Graduate Institute in Claremont, California is available. What I wanted to talk about today is affordability and should you go to Midyear? Is Midyear worth it? And I want to talk a little bit about what's going on in terms of the amount of money that you're having to pay for pharmacy school is going down in some places and making it, quotation fingers, more affordable. But affordable is in cash flow a lot more than it is in the amount you pay, because let's say you pay $100,000 for pharmacy school instead of $200,000. Well, you don't get an extra $100,000 in loans to use as you please. That number goes down to what your tuition is going to be. Still, your burden at the end is much less. So if you're taking a little bit more loans to do these extra things like mid-year, then it's not a terrible deal. But let me just show you what's kind of going on around the country. Let's go to this one. So to kind of see what the deal is at each school of pharmacy, you have this little red kind of ticker at the top of each school, and about half of the schools have done something like this. Some of them say no PCAT required, which is not really a thing because no school requires the PCAT anymore. But what you do also see is what's happening. So there's a wave of in-state tuition. So right now, Medical University of South Carolina does not charge out-of-state tuition. Out-of-state candidates receive the in-state resident tuition rate. The University of Illinois, Chicago, regardless now if you go to Rockford or Chicago, there is a one-rate tuition. It used to be just Rockford would get that. And then Idaho State, what they do is if you're eligible based on some GPA, they'll take care of your out-of-state in the first year and then help you get in-state for the last 3 years. So again, I'm not sure how that works. It's always been tough to get to as an in-state student, but again, they've figured out how to make the MPJE go away. So I can imagine that they would be clever enough to make out-of-state tuition go away for somebody that's already become somehow an Idaho resident. So those are three ways to save money by going to an out-of-state school for in-state tuition. And again, the big thing with that is that the average student and this is an average, the average student graduating from a public university owes $140,000, where the average graduating from a private university is $200,000 in loans. And that's if you owe loans. So again, 16% don't. But that's the average. So it's about $60,000 difference. And that's how you can kind of see, did you get a good deal, right? So if you're under $140,000 at loans for public, then great, you did better than the average. And if you did better than $200,000, you did better than the average for private. And then these, you'll have to look into them a little bit more. But if you look at Drake, they've got a bunch of dual degree programs, so you get the second degree if that's something that you value. So maybe you're not thinking about residency. Maybe you're thinking, I want to do that. Or, you are thinking about a specific type of residency and you do want that second degree. But also it says scholarships up to $26,000 per year for eligible applicants. So I'm not sure what it is to be an eligible applicant, but that's $104,000 less, which would put you way under the average based on the current tuition. And I think Belmont in Tennessee has something very similar. 4-year academic scholarships up to $25,000 per year for eligible candidates. So again, another opportunity to pay quite a bit less. Okay, so when you look at those, if you're pre-pharmacy, I know most of the people that are listening are not. You want to be careful of these, though. This Appalachian College of Pharmacy $100,000 advantage, what they're saying is that because you graduate in 3 years, that's a $100,000 advantage. But that's not necessarily true. First of all, to gross $100,000 is different than to net $100,000. So if you get a $100,000 scholarship, then you are netting $100,000 in savings. To net $100,000 in savings, you have to earn, as a new graduate, you would have to earn close to $145,000 based on current taxes and things like that. So that $100,000 advantage is not a scholarship. But then they say there are scholarships up to $10,000. So you would have to do the math with their tuition and all of that stuff. But there are like 19 3-year schools now. So that's not really a thing. Let's go to the meeting registration and kind of talk about what makes Midyear worth it. And the reason that I mentioned all this about the schools is that now some of you are coming out with much less in terms of a loan burden. And so if you paid $100,000 less to go to school because you got one of those $25,000 a year scholarships, or maybe you went in-state as an out-of-state student, then you're like, well, I'm not really graduating with a ton of debt. Is the investment that I'm going to be making in ASHP going to be worth it? And let me help you answer that question. Okay, so we look at registration, and most of you are members. I don't think it costs a ton to become a member as a student, and if you're really serious about residency, you probably did become a member. So early bird registration is at $340. But if you are coming in after October 15th, and you are a non-member, you can pay up to $500 to go to Midyear as a student. And then I really don't understand that when you talk about students and residents, you're only talking about a $50 difference. Though a resident, as little as they make, is still quite a bit more than a student makes. So a little bit surprised that resident and student costs are so similar. I don't think I qualify in the way that they define retired, but basically I'm a retired pharmacist. So I only did 10 years of practice because I just was able to move into this academic role and, 12 years from retirement. So I don't know if retired is really one of the things that you could ever use, but certainly a bit of a discount on what it would be for a pharmacist member. Anyway, so the big thing is you're spending that $300 plus probably $400 to $500 for flight, and then I in a previous episode I showed you that some of the hotels are relatively inexpensive. The problem is that the Saturday night, if you have to come in Saturday night or Friday and Saturday night, because there's an NFL game in town, because the rodeo's in town, It's quite expensive if you're coming in on those 2 days, and much less expensive if you're only coming for showcase. So let me show you how you could make it worth it. If you look at the schedule at a glance, you see that Sunday is the day where you have that student programming. So that's going to be letter of intent, interview, CV, those types of things. And there's resident and new practitioner programming. So there's the expectation that those guys are going to be coming in for PPS and that they're coming in on Saturday. So again, man, coming in Saturday is so expensive versus coming in on late Sunday as I am. And that's kind of up to you, but that's what makes it a little bit more expensive. What makes it worth it is if you are presenting a poster. So when you present a poster, you are basically getting top box, where you look in that kind of research and presentation section of your CV as they're looking at it at the rubric. And if you're presenting a poster, yeah, it's important that you go and that you present the poster to everybody. And yeah, you may sit there for an hour and maybe 3 or 4 people talk to you, and those people might be the people around you. But that is the most valuable thing in terms of getting a residency and checking off the research box, besides actually having a peer-reviewed publication. Presenting your poster at ASHP Midyear is quite the big deal. So if you're going to go, though, I want to remind you that it is the residency showcase, not the residency applicant showcase. So it is the residencies showing what they've got. And to be honest, the way that it becomes valuable is much the way that dating works. Things are very different than when my wife and I got married, 15 years ago, plus 2 years dating and engaged and all that stuff, where apps weren't the thing they are now. We actually met face-to-face in person, and long-distance relationship and all that. But when you meet someone that you'd seen on an app or on the internet, and you meet them again, as my brother says, you're meeting them again for the first time. It sounds a little bit weird, but I think there's a truth to it. And what happens is you're able to remove a bunch of sites that you had really thought were the thing. So these are good on paper is the expression. So I'm not sure what the expression is for dating, but good on paper sites, you saw something in them and you had an idea of what that meant, but it actually was like, oh, no, these are off the list. And by not using that time, energy, and money to apply to those sites, now you can apply to sites that are more something that you would be interested in. The other place where the showcase becomes valuable is in the lines. So long line, medium line, short line, no line. When you go, instead of being that person that has to be at the place where there's tons of people and you want to get your question in, I actually would do the opposite. I would actually just go up and down the aisles and start circling and looking at sites and just putting down long line, medium line, short line, no line. And the reason you do this is you start seeing, okay, what is the interest in this site? Because nowhere on the internet can you find something that says this is going to get, ranking sites by number of applications they get. You can figure it out in your head for like Mayo and UNC, places like that. But what you really don't know right now is, what are the chances of me getting it? Now, I've shown you a mathematical way to do it using the book that I published, Pharmacy School Rankings for Residency. And what you can do is go in there using the Kindle Cloud Reader or whatever. And what you can do is you can go through all of the residents at a site and see how kind of competitive their school was. And so when you look at a site, it's kind of like, you're the sum of your 5 friends type of thing. Well, a residency site is only good as the people that are in the residency. And when you look at the quality of that group, you can get a good idea of, what your chances are to match with something like that. But going back to the schedule here, you're going to have a lot of time. And the reason people are exhausted is that they're sitting there waiting in line. And that's not a really valuable use of your time. You just spent all this money to get there. You spent the money to actually become part of the meeting. What's really valuable is collecting the data. Okay. As I'm going through these sites, you're just kind of walking through, and all you're doing is just saying, how big's the line? And when you do the second half, and that I like to break up these residency showcase into halves, and it's kind of like the first and second half of a marathon. The first half, everybody's excited and smiling and talking to each other and all of that stuff. But man, once you get to that second half, miles after mile 13 and 14, you start to get a little weary. And then at mile 18, which for this would be the last 45 minutes of the showcase, there's really, really a completely different energy in the room. And I remember undergrad where I wasn't a very good starter, just kind of enamored with all the things you get to do in college. And in the beginning, I would always do bad in school. But at the end, I was great. And that sounds so bad. What I would do is I'd be going every day to, the tutors and the professor. And at the end of the semester, when people weren't coming to office hours, plenty of time to spend with the tutors and the professors, especially in like the calculus and organic chemistry and things like that. And so in the same way, it's not that you're speeding up, it's that everyone else is slowing down. And if this is an old school movie, Days of Thunder. Tom Cruise, he's a NASCAR driver. He's going around the track, and a big problem he had was he would burn out his wheels because he would go too fast during the race. And then at the end of the race, the tires were just all burnt out, and he used them up too quick. And so he's talking to his crew chief, and he's like, "Hey, Cole, slow down. You're going too fast." He's like, "I'm not going too fast. Everybody else is slowing down." And Buck Bretherton, who's his kind of the assistant crew chief or whatever, is like, "Yeah, he's right. His times haven't changed. He's just going the same as he was." He's like, "All right, but let's keep going." And so by doing this line thing, you're kind of going in with a certain calm that other people don't have. And you're going in and you're kind of collecting the data, just kind of getting a feel for the hall, who's where, and things like that. And you're also getting quite a bit of information for that end 45 minutes where you can say, okay, well, I can go to the places with no line now. I don't need to do that later. Or I can go to the places with a short line now. And then at the end, the big lines tend to dissipate quite a bit. And there's this fear of missing out, like, oh my gosh, I'm never going to get to ask my question. Well, it's not really about you anyway. It's about the showcase. And what you really want to do is kind of get a feel for the popularity of certain sites. And then once it does dissipate quite a bit, then you can start talking to people. So I think that there's a misunderstanding of what makes it worth it. And what makes it worth it is removing programs that you thought you wanted, but you really shouldn't go after. And then finding programs that are in places that you didn't think you would ever want to go. I live in the Midwest, and they call us flyover country, but I'm not from the Midwest. I'm from Washington, D.C., and then I moved to Baltimore, and so I went to big cities, and I never would have thought of Iowa, and then I met an Iowan, and I used to fly to Omaha, then drive 2 hours to come to Iowa to see her, and I never would have found Iowa if it wasn't for her. And I think it's something very similar, where there are many programs that may not have the name of the city. So instead of being in Cincinnati, it might be 20 minutes from in some town that doesn't sound like a residency, doesn't sound like a big city, but it's actually a suburb. And you don't realize that, wow, that's really a great site. And that's someplace I would want to really, hang out at for a year. So making it worth it, First two things. One, go around and get a feel for it. Don't get part of the craziness where you're going to see people just piled deep. You're going to keep getting bumped as you go on. Get a sense of those sites and kind of understanding what is it that people are really looking for. What are the places that are going to get hundreds of applications? And what are some places that are not going to get quite as much interest, and that would be a real opportunity to have a great residency year, but that may not have the glamour, quotation fingers, of an academic medical center, which is kind of funny because, well, it's not funny, but the people that are having the worst staffing are generally at the academic medical centers working 12 days in a row. So it's crazy that these masses are going to this very, very difficult place in terms of work-life balance. Okay, so I'll talk about this over and over again. Again, the student posters on Monday are a big deal, that you're presenting a poster. And you may check out the professional posters if you want to see what the pharmacists are doing. But what happens is that once you get past Tuesday, everybody says, okay, well, students' night out is Tuesday, 7 to 9 p.m. I'm going to leave on Wednesday morning really early. Okay. However, the biggest opportunity is on Wednesday all day, which are the resident posters. You will learn more about what you will do in a residency, what you can do to succeed in a residency interview, and connect with actual residents on Wednesday than you would on any other day of the week. And that's why I think it's such a shame that it's set up this way, but it has to be, because the people that are presenting resident posters, obviously they're busy with Showcase on Monday, Tuesday. They've got some programming that they do on Sunday. There's no other place to put it. But the real education, the real should I do a residency, is on Wednesday, and talking to people who are residents. You might say, okay, well, I'm going to do this Zoom thing and I'm going to go to their webinar and I talk to them at Showcase. Well, they are under duress. You see many, many people there, and it's just answering the same questions over and over again. It's very uncomfortable. But the resident posters on Wednesday, December 7th, that's the biggest education you're going to get about residency. But also, when you talk about your research project and what you're really interested in, maybe you're interested in peds, it's very easy to go to certain posters and learn quite a bit about the subject, and to kind of go from there. So my personal feeling, and these are the cheapest days to stay overnight in Las Vegas, because the big push is Monday night, Tuesday night, and then Wednesday night is the cheapest night to stay. If I were applying for a residency, I would go Sunday through Thursday, not Sunday night through what a lot of people do is leave Wednesday morning. I don't think I would do that. So to summarize, my 3 tips for deciding whether ASHP is worth it. Number 1, how are you looking in terms of finances? I went over a bunch of schools that now basically take about $100,000 off of, the amount that you're going to pay at the end of your education. And, if you're paying $100,000 less, paying a couple thousand to find the place to go isn't really too far out of sorts, I don't think, in terms of the big picture. Number 2, talking about why you would go. So you're going for the student posters, and you're going to meet residents at their posters. Okay, that's why you go. So if you're going to present, to increase your chances by having a much better, checked off boxes on the rubric that you get graded on, and that's in my interview course, and to meet the residents and learn more about what it is to be a resident, what it is to do research at a residency, to make true relationships with them that you can put in your letter of intent. Hey, I met you at your poster. That's a very different thing than I was one of the hundreds of people that came to the showcase. No, I actually stayed on Wednesday and I talked to you about your poster. And we actually talked about some of the things that you were doing and that I was really interested in and so forth. And that you were interested in, and we made a genuine connection. Okay, that's number 2. Okay. And then the number 3 reason you go is showcase. And that is to eliminate programs that you thought you would want, but based on talking to them and getting, it's really a vibe thing. If you go sixth sense, kind of thing. I'll give you an example of this. I went to go I was, buying my third house, and I was as an investment, and I was like, okay, I didn't need my wife to go. I had done all the numbers. I was enamored with it, but I wanted her sense of it. And so she went, and she's like, I don't really like it. It's like, wow, that took you a couple of seconds. Busy road. It's just, I just don't really like it. But you haven't been in it. Yeah, no, just don't really like it. Okay. And I just was, went to the person the next day. I was like, yeah, I brought my wife. She didn't really like it. And she, had a little conversation about why she didn't like it. And I was like, I just didn't feel like the right move for her. And so, we just kind of held off on it. And come to see later, when I'm, out of this kind of, I guess infatuation with the home, because it was a new townhouse, and it was just like all the marble counters and all the just newness of it. I didn't even realize that there was a telephone pole right in front of the house. I'm talking like 30 feet, 40 feet tall telephone pole that was in the front yard. And could I have still bought the house, sold the house, rented the house with that thing there? Yeah. But just the fact that I completely missed something so huge, and that she was able to digest something just with her sense of it. So use your spidey senses when you're at a program. And if it doesn't feel right, there's a reason for it. And you don't have to figure out what the reason is. But maybe it's the exhaustion that you're seeing on the residents' faces. Or, the residents are saying, oh, yeah, come here, while they're shaking their head. No, do not come here. Because it's just been a toxic experience for them, and that they really never get time off, and that they that what they expected was not what they ended up with, and those types of things. So use your spidey senses to figure out that, no, okay, from the residency showcase, this does not feel as good as it did when I was looking at it on paper. And then the last tip is to find those places that don't have a lot of lines, or that maybe have smaller lines, and that are not popular because of their location, which is usually what it is. That people usually have someone else coming with them, and they're also going to need to get a job. And you're like, that's really weird. This has all of the residency rotations I would want to have. These people are like super nice, and they're so happy. And they all look so relaxed, and they want to hang out with me a little bit later at, whatever, state thing that's going on later. And wow, I'm just really gelling with these people, and I've just known them for a couple minutes. Those are the types of things that you're really looking for. If I had gone to wherever I was going and said, man, I only want to talk to people that are from, the East Coast or the Mid-Atlantic, that's kind of ridiculous, right? You can't help who you fall in love with. And I think there's something to that when it comes to residency. You're going to fall in love with some of these programs, and it is going to be heartbreak when you don't get some, but you're going to find later that the match does actually work really, really well. So many candidates, and I'm talking from the student side and the applicant side, so many get their first choice and second choice and third choice. And on the residency side, I mean, they can go all the way down to like their 36th choice, where that's who they're going to get. So on the student side, when you get a residency, it usually is one of your top choices. And so I think that the match does work, but it works a lot better if you don't apply to places that you're in love with because of what you saw on paper, rather than the people that you've met. And there is no better advertisement for any site than the people that are there. So those are my three tips to do well and make Midyear worth it. Yes, it's expensive, but when you look at the investment that you've made in the entire process of pharmacy school, the hundreds of thousands of dollars, it's actually not a ton. And then if you're one of those people who are benefiting from all of these scholarships and the reductions in state, and then even some schools have reduced tuition quite a bit, you are, I don't know how much of a price you can put on finding a job that you absolutely love and that gets you to the career that you want. Okay, so if you want to talk to me, TonyThePharmacist@gmail.com. And then if you want to work one-on-one with me, letter of intent, that's residency.teachable.com. Letter of intent course is where we usually start out, and we start writing right away and getting you to understand what you're missing in the big five: clinical, teaching, research, service, and leadership, and make sure that during your APPEs you can fill those in, and then later on, as we get towards you deciding which programs are your best, then we do our true letters of intent, those first two, and I show you how to do that. All right, our music is from Policy, and again, if you need me, TonyThePharmacist@gmail.com.